Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome, Scott. So this is part 4 of our dialogue, and without further introduction, I would like to just get straight into it. And for those who are watching this, there are 3 more episodes of this on the same YouTube link on psychotherapy and non-duality, and different important topics there to discuss. So Scott, I guess in this topic of psychotherapy and non-duality, an important tenet or principle of non-duality is this self-inquiry. Self-inquiry, which I guess is very ancient from the Upanishads and even earlier, the Indian rishis, but somehow it became more known in the West last century through these Indian sages like Ramana and Nisargadatta. I have a Nisargadatta shirt, where they call it direct path. Direct path is that rather than exploring the ego, rather than trying to modify or improve or purify one's, they call it the mental tendencies and all these things, which was supposed to be for people who are more like a beginner of the path, for more people seasons on the path. There was this, hey, let's go straight for it by asking it was called supposed to be the highest form of meditation, self-inquiry, which could be, while being in a meditative, let's say Buddhist-like state of witnessing and being aware, to ask, to drop this question, who am I, what am I? Later, people like Rupert Spiro, other modern day spiritual teachers, they felt like that might have been overutilized. So let's give it a little booster of freshness, and would say the question, what is aware right now? Or what is, if I have some sensations in my stomach, to go like, what is aware of this agitation? What is aware of sounds? And so we have all these questions. All of these questions, they all have the same answer. Basically, the one, who am I, what is aware of sounds, it's the same one. And in the teaching, the idea was that it is not meant to be answered by the mind. So if the mind says, okay, this is Mihai, or hey, this is a pure divine spirit, which is nice label, any of these are just thoughts that are meant to be witnessed, and you say, okay, this is not me, this is a thought is not aware, let it go. There are either some secondary questions, like when the thought comes, to be like, to whom do this thought arises? So again, coming back to, and the idea was to wait without trying to have any answer, and just to look into that direction. And they would say there that initially the mind will be busy, but then the mind will be quiet, it will become empty. You say, here we go, that's what you are, stay with that. And they were saying the question is not meant to be answered, it's meant to dissolve the questioner. Ramana said that. Some other things, Ramana would say, whatever arises, let what things come, come. Thoughts, feelings, let what go. Be interested in that which remains. So another thing would be, whatever arises, like you have a turmoil or like a depression, be interested in that which is aware of it. So constantly was like, hey, don't be busy with the suffering, come back to the subject. Even now, modern day teachings, non-dual teachings, they have this thing, okay, when there's suffering, who is suffering? Muji, other people, Rupert, find the sufferer. Then we, okay, I'm pissed. Okay, who is pissed? I am. Okay, find this I. Then you can be like, okay, this is in my chest, is a contraction. am I this contraction, or am I that which is aware of it? And then hopefully the practitioner is like, no, I'm not this contraction, I am that which is aware of it. So that's the main tool, let's say, in the direct path initially, to establish the right identity, I guess, and the identity between subject and the objects. Later they go in the direct path, like, okay, is this which is aware, is this limited, is it personal, or is it unlimited? Or anyway, this is like a later stage, let's say, but first establishing the subject and keep focusing on the subject. So it seems from your discoveries, and I totally agree with you, like from my experiential experience with myself and others, that doesn't, although it's like wonderfully essential, doesn't seem to be enough to free oneself from suffering, from anxiety, from depression, from addiction, from. So I think that will be an important topic to go into that. So especially you are using this word inquiry, you have the Kiloby inquiries and other inquiries, and we speak about, okay, inquire or investigate, but you are not investigating into the nature of that which is aware lately. You are investigating, you are doing ego inquiry. So I wonder how, from your own path, from your own journey, did you had some exposure to this self-inquiry, and how did you come to the ego inquiry, and how do you see, are they both necessary, or now you don't focus so much on the who am I with clients or people who come to you?
I think at this point, it's like a hybrid, because you said it's wonderfully essential to point out that the awareness piece of this as people are inquiring. So during a session, depending on if someone's ready for that, I will point to that, like which is closer to what you are, what's looking or what you're looking at, or just those kinds of questions that have them established as not being the phenomena. That's all important. But we talk about my own personal path. So what we did with the living inquiries, which was the first incarnation of inquiries that we created, it was a lot like the who am I, although it was more somatic based. So when it got down to contractions, we started to learn how to ask questions that would mine out certain more unconscious things, which took it deeper, because there's some unconscious stuff hidden in our experience. But even with that, because we felt like with the living inquiries, we had sort of upgraded that who am I in a way, in the sense that not just coming back to the awareness and pointing to that, but also showing people that the phenomena is not what they are and helping them dig into it to see that. But then we saw a limitation even with that, in that, for example, with my chronic pain, like I said, for 2 years, I didn't really go into any deep inquiry in it. And so it was just like resting with it and kind of saying, okay, like you said, there's the contraction. I'm aware of that. I am what's aware of it. But what I came to find out is that inside the contraction, inside that, somehow is something's being held. And so when I say held, I mean like something's being identified with, in that there are thoughts, there are programs there are stories, trauma responses connected to that contraction or that pain. So when I say the contraction isn't me, I'm essentially putting the cart before the horse, is the way I see it. It's like I've already decided that everything in that is not me when I don't even see it yet. I haven't seen what's there. So how can I say it's not me?
Yeah.
So learning how to go in there and find out what's connected into that, what's embedded in that, the programs, and pull those up. But even when you pull them up, there are other networks that you can go down. So like, even if you pull up, so for example, my chronic pain, a lot of it was anger, repression. That was not going to show itself in any kind of who am I thing, because it was repressed. So even when I found the material, like, yeah, I can't express anger or something, it wasn't just that thought. It was a very strong series of thoughts and had lots of eddies in it, like reasons why I can't. And being able to be conscious of that helped move through that identification, being conscious of it. But if I'm not conscious of it, then I don't know how to move through that. And the way that I see it is, like we talked about this before, is if you just look at the timeline, these teachings are, with the exception of like traditional Advaita, which went to painstaking detail, seemingly, on clearing up a lot of this stuff on the path. Some of the paths just were created at a time when we weren't trauma informed and we didn't understand about how we hold things in the body and the unconscious and repression. Then science came about. And I think that these teachings just haven't completely incorporated what science has learned, but also we don't even need science, what people like you, practitioners, are finding, that we need to go deeper into that somatic experience. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. So let's slow it down a little bit. I have some comments, I mean, some questions on what you said here. Yeah, basically if you were to have this contraction there and you just do the self-inquiry, am I this contract, am I not, I'm that which is aware of it, it will be like a wholesale dismissing of a whole thing of pain body. And so that will contribute to repression. And actually there is this principle somewhere in, I guess, both in non-duality or in psychotherapy, that what you are not aware of is driving behavior. So what you are aware of is going to create havoc, and what I'm not aware of can become I. I mean, it doesn't become I, but it takes over the identity, and it's like me now pissed, me frustrated with the world, it's not fair, and so yeah, I totally understand. And in the tradition, I remember that stories with Ramana and interviews, and many people come to him and he would give them different things. So he was discriminant. So he would say that the highest teaching is just silence. You are here with me. That's the best. That's the highest teaching. However, not many of you are at that level. So the next highest teaching is just do self-inquiry and be here with me. But then some people are like, hey, this is not working. So he would ask them, hey, what are you doing? Well, I'm doing the chanting, or I'm giving offerings. Okay, all right, keep doing that. So he would be very customizing, and not just one size fits all, which I feel that is happening in some of the satsang non-dual circles I'm going to, which I'm still going to, but I notice whenever, let's say, I would come with a personal suffering, like some attachment wound that creates subtle problems in a relationship, and it's not too stinky, so it's not too bad, but it's like, and whenever I would bring it to the teacher, there will be a little like, hey, this is not you, you are that which is aware of it, you are totally okay as you are. And so, which I knew they are true what they're saying, but it was not helpful somehow to free myself from this issue.
That wasn't any help for me with the chronic pain. That kind of instruction wasn't very helpful. But going even back, what I've talked about, like a 3-year sex addiction that happened after the non-dual realization, to me, that's a really good example, because my body was just doing things unconsciously, like you said. And if I would have stopped in any one of those moments and just looked at the thoughts that were there, I could have said easily that I'm not those thoughts or sensations. But it continued happening because something wasn't going deep enough into that to dismantle it. So there's a prime example. You probably have examples in your life. And so if I would have gone to a non-dual teaching and they would have said, that's not you, I would have probably immediately just left, because it's like, that's not what I need right now. I get that piece of it, but something else has to happen here to get to this real deep stuff here, the shame, all that stuff that attends sexual compulsion. So it's like we're just doing it's everything that Ramana did and is great. It's, like you say, foundational and very important. We're just upgrading it. And the thing is I think in 20 years, 40 years, 100 years, someone's going to be upgrading what we're saying right now. We're just in the middle of this, discovering new pathways, but other people will develop, I feel, in the future more.
Hopefully, yes. Actually coming back to this living inquiry or the unfindable inquiry, which I still find it very powerful for the people who are, let's say, already, let's say, have some experience about what we are, about true identity. because it establishes, this is called in the Indian teaching, the viveka, which is the first step to discriminate between objects and the perceiver. So I remember I saw this session online you had there with unfindable inquiry, and also one of my teachers was doing that often. Let's say, okay, I come to some belief, some mining, and it comes out like, yeah, you know, there's something wrong with me. Yeah, so we identify some limiting core belief. There's something wrong with me. And in your unfindable inquiry would be like, okay, let's find this one with whom there's something wrong with. And then you'll ask the client, okay, just see what comes up. Can you find it in your image, in your mind? And then the client will have, yeah, this image, I was 7 and the daddy is just went away and left me in the pool or something, whatever. So, and then you will ask, is this image me? There's no, it's not, it's an image. Okay, and I am that which is aware of it. So, and then something in the body. Oh yeah, it's here. And then you will walk them through feeling deeply that sensation, and then having the client realize that, oh, I'm the perceiver of this sensation. So this in non-dual path, that's very important. But I guess you are saying that, yeah, that's right. But that contraction has more, has more. And there's a big file there, which, you know, from somatic psychotherapy, that's what we were trained. There's a file there, memory, another memory, some thought, something. And so I can totally see that it's more thorough like this. The investigation is more thorough and complete.
Yeah. The first foray I had into that, now that I look back, was having that realization of no self, the non-dual realization, and then walking into a room with my ex-husband, and he said something and I felt wounded, but I wasn't conscious of what I was believing in that moment. So the standard non-dual pointer would say, okay, so this woundedness is that you, and you could just sit there and rest with it and it would pass. But there's a discovery that can happen in the midst of that when you ask, what does this woundedness have to say about me? Or what are the network of thoughts connected to it? Because then it can take you into that woundedness a little bit more, where it can release some of that, going from a contraction to an actual emotion that never got processed earlier in life. So that was the value that I saw early on, is not just to say, is this me, is that me, but to dig a little bit deeper into the somatic experience to find out, what is it that, why is this here? Not why, like analytical, but there's a reason. Nothing happens in a vacuum. There must be something that I'm believing, or something from my past that's connected to that. And if I don't have inquiries to take me into that, then I'm stuck with, this isn't me, but then I can't see all that's in there. And that's what I found with that. And so when I went deeper into that, it was helpful. I was able to see through deficiency story in a way that the standard kind of non-dual thing didn't do for me, because the deficiency hid as an unconscious woundedness, or like you say, pain body. And it shows up that way. It doesn't show up as, oh, you think you're unlovable. It might, but it won't show you everything. It'll just show you wounded or hurt or angry. And so you have to dig a little bit deeper. Then, other than just saying it's not me, because there's things connected to it. That's the thing. That's discovering those things.
Yeah, this wounded feeling, it's in the non-dual teaching, that's the me feeling, the separate sense of me feeling. So actually for your method, what we are doing, we are really investigating that me feeling until it dissolves. And actually that's what Ramana wanted to do. And who is the sufferer, but not stop like, oh, this is not me, but let's really let it, as you call it, to put the cards on the table or something, I guess, a poker metaphor. Yeah, you know, I appreciate about your guiding through the method is that you don't make a big deal about this in terms of theory, but you are helping the client experientially practice, I mean, observe experientially at the level of each thought. I remember when you were guiding me and people would say, okay, so just this thought, people say, out of the woundedness comes some thought, oh yeah, I can't trust her, I can't trust her. And there's a little like, and you're like, hey, just stay with this thought, witness this thought. Don't be afraid of it until it collapses by itself. And it's important to see the how it came and how it goes, and then you remain. So you are, without too much theory, you are giving opportunity people to see this, the impermanence, the no self, but not in a theoretical way.
I learned that early on because when I started working with people, I learned that some people come to me and if they have a lot of programming around the non-dual language, that in many cases it was like they were overcompensating. That wouldn't be like necessarily the clinical term for it, but it would be like they're using that script as a way not to come down and investigate. So I learned early on is not to make what I was doing too theoretical to add to that. It's because I have the books out there that give the non-dual context. I have the instruction on the inquiry. But I feel like if you discover that in your own experience, it's so much more powerful than just reading about it. And people, we have to read about it at first, but then when you come into session, if you're really programmed in that way, it can be, it can get in the way of the real experiential work, depending on how open someone is. But I just learned that early on that, and you maybe did too, it's like, it's the experience that makes this come alive. It's not what we know about it. In fact, once you recognize it, a lot of the pointers go away. I even think they even said like that even the teaching is illusion in Advaita. So at some point you even see that all that falls away. So, you know, we're not even going to land there on that in the end. Those are just pointers. And if we stay programmed to them, we might not investigate the body deep enough.
Yeah, becomes like a religion. Yeah, you know, in the teachings, they say that even this who am I question, this is like the stick, they say, is the stick with which you put things into the fire to burn. And then when the fire is really burning, then there's nothing else, you can put the stick
throw
there.
the stick in.
Throw the stick in the fire. It's a Ramana metaphor. And you know, it reminds me that actually Francis, Lucille, he often speaks about this, like, hey guys, it's not you go there and say, who am I, who am I, who am I, who am I? No, you do this a few times until you get it. And then you don't need to keep asking, who am I, who am I? You know, there are other things to keep move on from there, you know? So it's not like a mantra.
Meaning that people maybe get stuck on it. Is he was catching that, like they're just getting stuck in a loop on that? Is that what he said?
Yeah, because people, I mean, like admiring, you know, Ramana texts and Robert Adams, and it's like, it's very important, and this is the most important, so you just need to do this. And there are some, I think Goodman, the guy who wrote the book, I mean, a wonderful teacher and like devoted to Ramana, although he never met him, but he's been doing the self-inquiry for decades. And then he would say he would sit and would meditate, and then he would put this, who am I, what am I? And then some point we'll recharge it and do this for hours. And so yeah, Francis was saying to, once you get the answer, then you need to move on to some other investigations. Yeah.
I would say yes, but also with how core a deficiency story is and how tightly it hangs on, that it comes up so often. So if you turn away from it too much, it'll hook you again and again. So that's why we kind of focus on it for a while until there's a real freedom from it. I don't know what he meant by that, but you know how insidious that is, like the deep core belief there's something wrong with you. If you're not awake to it, it easily grabs you in any given moment in a relationship or something. So I always tell people, don't jump off too quickly, because that's one of the core things held in your body that'll keep reappearing and creating issues in your relationship and your life. I don't know exactly what he meant by that, but I'm just taking what you said, but I'm just how I would answer it. It's like, don't jump off too soon, because there might be more there. It's integral to see.
So I guess all this this somatic method of investigation, I can see that it's meant to explore thoroughly what we are not, the construction, the mental, emotional, somatic construction, and to explore it thoroughly, that it diminishes and it dissolves, and then it's less of that me feeling suffering, and then it's more obvious to see the emptiness. Let's say it's not like, oh wow, it's empty and now it's full, it's empty. No, it's kind of empty, naturally empty. I don't need to make it empty. You know, always here again.
Well, that also brought up something sort of related to that, but like, just the seeking energy that we have. So we pick up these things like, who am I? That seeker identity gets a hold of something. I can see where that would be, just going back to what Francis said, how that would be a loop that you get stuck in. So again, going back to deficiency story, I kind of take a unique slant on that seeking energy, because to me, it feels like it's tied directly to the core aspect of ego, the deficiency.
Yeah.
Because as long as you think there's something wrong with you, the enlightenment, the search feels like, oh, that's the answer.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll focus on that deficient self. To, it's like focusing on
Yeah.
self, right? But the core aspect of it, which I feel like is behind a lot of the seeking energy, because
Yeah.
to me, it's like common sense. If I think there's something wrong with me, I'm going to keep going,
Yeah.
thinking I'm right. So I'll just like say, let's find out what the deficiency story is that's driving that seeking.
Yeah.
Let's go hone in on that. And then as that seeking energy dies and you're living from and as awareness more, then you can stay in inquiry without getting hooked as much, because the seeker identity is the one that gets hooked into it, like it's going to give me something, I want to get somewhere.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I'm trying to escape my experience.
Yeah.
So I think that I say that a lot to people, because many people will pick up any particular modality and turn it into a game of seeking, like the seeking energy gets a hold of it. So we have to say that to them when they come to this work, because they can do the same thing, which is picking it up and looping into it endlessly without without dissolving the seeker
Yeah.
identity with that. So yeah, so I to me it's tied to the deficiency story though.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that all my life until some years ago. I was Life didn't matter, school didn't matter, career didn't matter, and this like awakening at what was, I don't know, maybe from past life, whatever. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful because it created a trajectory. But there was like, but it was never getting, and there was this sense of that somehow later, if I do this long enough, and that this will keep changing, but somehow later something will happen that I will attain it, and that somehow that's not okay what's happening now. And I wasn't at all questioning this. I was actually strengthening this to be more one-pointedness of samurai mind, but more like lately it started to somehow the drive towards that kind of, yeah, I think that somehow for meeting Francis, and lately it's kind of diminished, but there was never any that carrot that I didn't get the carrot, but also I noticed that I don't want to chase the carrot. Somehow the things kind of changed, it's less somewhere else somehow. Interesting.
Yeah. So not a big bang experience, just kind of a gradual what falling away.
I
Is
guess
how it's
so.
happening there.
Yeah, they say somebody said like it's like sometimes like Will Ramana, he was going to school and he just fell down and he thought I'm going to die, and or Eckhart Tolle or other people like that. And some other people, it's like as if you are walking in fog. You are walking in the fog, and but after a few miles you are getting wet, but you didn't realize that it wasn't
Right,
hydrant.
right. It's a good analogy, like that.
So can you give me some pointers, some inquiries that you can help dispel the carrot and the seeking energy when somebody comes to you with like, you feel that and how do you detect that? How do you detect that strong seeking, and how do you some process inquiry to dismantle that?
Well, one of the big processes is to dismantle the deficient self, right? Of course, so doing inquiry on that. But another thing is, I remember, I probably told you this story, but I remember like I had one of the shifts to me was like discovering stillness, and like, oh, that's a real thing, like deep stillness. But then even after that, because that felt like very complete on one level, but then the mind would be like replaying some of Adyashanti's words, like you're not done until you experience the unity consciousness. So the seeking started back up after that experience of stillness. And for a while, I was writing that too. It was like, oh, so I need to have a unity conscious, a oneness experience. And I'd just be like looking around, waiting for that to happen, right? Like I've talked about this, like walking my dogs, thinking that if I just look a certain way or do something, something's going to happen. But then instead, what I did is that then I started noticing whenever that Adyashanti thought would come up, then I would just watch it and let it fall away. And just every time, so any time at a certain point, anytime a thought came up that said there's something else that has to happen, anytime it said that, I would just observe that. Because the idea, and now I see why, because the idea is that if I'm still dreaming about my path of something happening to me, that's still the identity. Even if I'm dreaming about a oneness experience, it's still the ego seeking after it. So when it would come up, almost everything I did other than witness it seemed to reinforce the seeking at that point. So instead I would just, okay, I need to have a oneness experience, quiet. I need to have this quiet. And when it went quiet, when the mind wasn't doing that anymore, then I got to explore the nature of reality here more, because the thought kept trying to take me away from the present experience of its, even the seeking thought, the oneness thought. So when that dissolved, then I started to explore, without that seeking mind doing that so much, I started to explore the nature of everything. So looking at like those trees back there and how the trees meet the sky and the sky meets the ground, and just looking at the seamlessness of everything, that was more potent than just following the thought that I need to find something later.
Yeah. I like it. And so you're doing this actually, these are like they call it tantric tricks to see the absence of borders experientially with the senses, to experience the non-separation, the
Right.
senses. Yeah.
Which makes me now realize that if I'm dreaming about this one experience that I have to have, I'm already kind of buying into the separation right then. So by letting that thought dissolve, then that part of the separation of that story could dissolve, and then I could actually investigate whether there was separation here. But I couldn't very well when I was still chasing that carrot. So that was really important for me. I don't know if that helps anyone else. It's so seductive that it's like people can resist this, because it's like, what do you mean I just let the thought of having oneness experience or enlightenment dissolve? Because that's what I'm looking for. But if you can understand it that way, is as long as you're dreaming about that and identifying with that thought, it is a sense of separation. Let the thought come to rest and explore the nature of reality here without that story playing all the time.
So I see you are I guess when people have strong seeking energy, you are kind of redirecting to explore what's missing right now, right? And it will come the deficiency, story, identity, and then you dismantle that, and then, I mean, through these inquiries, and then the person, I think you notice on some of your videos, the person may lose some of that interest. They don't want the enlightenment so much anymore, or you didn't notice that?
Just when, in terms of when they start to deconstruct some of the stories, they lose interest in enlightenment.
Yeah.
Because again, I think it's the stories and the traumas and the deficiency stories that are driving it to begin with.
Yes.
So as you dissolve those, I think we stop dreaming so much about some later place, especially when we recognize there's a way to be with experience now skillfully. You start to recognize that, and then you don't need that dream anymore. So I see that. But ironically, then that's when people do begin to wake up. That's very ironic. That when it's almost like when they don't care about that anymore and they're settled in their own experience now directly, that's when those insights and realizations will pop up.
Yes. Like also by doing your method, or some good awareness-based somatic work. I should put all this like psychotherapy and no, like somatic psychotherapy and non-duality, But anyway, one is doing that, one will diminish the sense of pain body, the sense of suffering. So there is less wanting to escape something.
Right.
And so then I'm more here, naturally more here.
And that's where we can explore the body, the embodiment piece. When we're finally here and not dreaming about the experience we're supposed to be having in the future, now we're here and we can attend to these sensations that have been here all the time, driving the search. Now we can explore them and see what's behind it all, dismantle that.
Yes. And we develop also this we see that these things that harassed me and I was trying to avoid, they are actually pretty bearable, actually. And so I think it was in the, Francis said something that it seems like this monster coming to attack you, but if you turn towards it, you see it's like a 2x4 tiger in a theater. So then you demonster it by facing it. And I think many people that I meet in the non-dual circles, and including myself, I was trying to, okay, I found the ultimate teaching and I have some suffering. Oh, I'm going to use this ultimate teaching to not feel like this anymore, you know? So as Francis calls it, okay, I'm welcoming, but it's a fake welcoming. It's like you are welcoming at the door, but you have a Uzi. You're like, yeah, welcome, but I want to get rid of you, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So through doing this good somatic work, we've experienced that it's bearable. Basically, it's bearable and it's pretty okay, and so more courageous, less wanting to escape the feeling, you know.
And I have direct experience with that, of like just with anger, when anger apparently would come up early in the path before my practice was more somatic based. I had the Uzi for that. I didn't realize I did. So I would say things like just welcome all emotions. But when it came to anger, because there was a repression, it was like before I'd even give it a chance to come alive, just sort of dismiss it, come back to awareness. There's a good example right there of what you're saying.
Yeah. Let's see. How is your timing? Do you have time to go into something else?
I do. It's up to you. I have a few minutes here.
A few minutes. Okay. Well, I was really wanting to go into. We had one of the episodes on reverse inquiry, and we talked a lot about the reverse inquiry. And in many applications, I think is in episode number 2, part 2. I would like to go into more of some of your inquiries and give them more attention, like the utility and the boomerang. Maybe we don't have time to go into both, but because I feel from my experience, the reverse inquiry and the utility inquiry and maybe these two for sure, they are like a martial arts that is like 1-2 punch. I'm not into martial arts so much, but I like it's a very somehow they it's like go together like a piston in order to keep mining out more unconscious material and to find out. So can you talk about this the utility, maybe what's the philosophy behind this and how do you discover it and when to use it?
So I developed this work with Dan McClintock. He was living with me. He was a client at the Kiloby Center, our treatment center, and then he later on became a friend and a facilitator. And we were developing this work, and he came up to me one day at the Kiloby Center and he said, "Nothing exists in a vacuum." I was like, okay, say more. He's like, well, these beliefs that we see in inquiry, like I'm this or I'm that, they're not just there by themselves. There's a usefulness to it. And I said, okay, show me. So he started asking the utility question, which is, so if I believe I'm unlovable, what do I get out of believing that? So then you start to see the usefulness of it. Now, here's a pathway, or you could say an element of our consciousness that I don't know that we've accessed before, at least in this work, the utility behind the beliefs. We might ask why questions in therapy, you know, like say, well, why am I doing this? We might sort of get to the root of it.
That's not recommended usually because it goes in the mind. But
right.
Go
exactly.
ahead.
This can happen too, but so we want to witness the utilities as they come up so we don't go into the mind. So you can use utility inquiry anywhere where there's a strong belief that it's not existing in a vacuum. And you can tell that when words come up or something comes up that's really strong, it could be because it's strongly held to some body sensation, but also we find out that there's utilities. The stronger things are, there's usually some very strong utilities with it. So pulling those up and seeing those is helpful, but seeing them dissolve, like pulling them up repeatedly, because that's part of what you believe too, not just the belief, but the utility, the usefulness behind it. What I think it gets fascinating is when we start doing the deep somatic work and we pull up some really unconscious programming that we've been using to serve for a long time. the utilities are very strong on that level.
Mhm.
So, so for going back to repression, just because it's a good example, in repressing an emotion or something all your life, you didn't do that for no reason, right? There were
Yeah.
good, strong utilities for that. But if you don't see the utilities, you might have difficulty coming out of the repression because, again, there's a usefulness behind repressing it. So seeing those is important. But the other thing is also seeing why so many people are getting stuck, even once they know how to go into the somatic. There's a resistance that comes up because they're coming face to face with these old survival programs that have utilities. So, for example, I'll just going back to my own inquiry. One thing that I discovered with the chronic pain was the phrase "get away." Now, get away is like what? Okay, it's like a trauma command or something, like to the bullies, get away. So let's see, what was I saying here? The utility. So
Yeah.
that comes up and it's very strong. Get away, get away, get away. It's something that the child was saying or couldn't say, and then it was hidden and repressed for years. And then an inquiry here comes up: get away, get away, get away. The strength of that, I needed to see why I was turning away from that, because it was obviously connected to my pain and I needed to see it, but I kept saying wincing away. It was actually hard to witness it. Like I'd be like, I couldn't, it's like get away from the thought. It was like, so then when I went into inquiry, I saw that the reason that it's so hard to see is because it's serving me, my consciousness in some way. It's serving, there's a usefulness to it. And so the get away was keeping me safe. It was protecting me. It was actually getting me love and approval on some way, because if I could get away, then I could find other people that, it had strong utilities with it. It was a survival, like I survived this way. So when I pulled up those utilities and I went through them several times, the get away started getting weaker, but it also became easier to witness because the utilities weren't so strong, because the usefulness of that belief was being seen through, so that somehow I could come into awareness more. That's a really good example, I think, of. But the point I'm trying to make is that it stops people on this level too, if they're not inquiring into utility, because something comes up very strong and they're turning away from it because it's a survival pattern. And if they don't see why they're turning away from it, they just may turn away from it and continue to turn away from it, when that could be a big culprit for why their body's contracted or they're still believing stuff. This is why I think utility is so important, not just to see all this stuff that's behind our thoughts, but also to recognize why we're resistant, because we're going into very powerful, we've said this before, important, useful utilities. Like trauma responses have utilities, and we're not necessarily going to go willingly into that. Like, let's just go for liberation here, because these are survival strategies. They're going to be a little more persistent than that. Especially like there's an example of how the who am I is challenging on that level. Who am I? Because I can't even look at it. Like there's times when I couldn't even look at it. I need to be able to look at it. I needed to go into the unconscious utilities to be able to turn towards it, because it was so powerfully useful in my experience.
Yeah. So we're not going to have a deep answer of who am I if there is unopened trauma in the vault. I mean, really, I don't know how one can do that. Or one may get that experience, but later one will have some shit coming up. But coming to what you said, you are talking about this, which is interesting. I never heard this term of trauma command, but it is true. Once it goes really to like trauma, which is unmetabolized, shocked information in the body. So it seems like what you say, the get away, or that was
get off
more
me,
like
stop, don't, can't.
That was unexpressed. So it was like it got into freezing, was frozen. And so usually when I work with clients, when they get to that, I want them to get away. But I see what you're saying. I'm working with some people, and I'm using utility a lot, even, I mean, not to trauma command, but even something milder. Let's say, actually, I was doing your work around repression, and I was inspired about a repression of love. So I was working with a person who is in love with someone, but cannot tell them I love you, and I kind of experienced that as a child, and it's family of origin. And I will do this reverse, like, okay, I have no problem I can fully express my love. towards this person with whom they love. And it was like, no, 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 it's not safe. No, if I do this, it's so something will come up. And then each time I will ask, so that's how I'm using, that's what you're saying. Whenever some interesting answer comes up through mining or reverse inquiry, we'll say, well, if I express, he may leave and I will be demolished. Okay, so when there's such thought like that, okay, what do you get by believing this thought? Right there it comes. What's the seeming utility, the seeming advantage of this? And she will say something like, yeah, I get to protect myself. And then it comes a memory that when she was 23, she did say, I love you to someone. And then the guy left straight up. So actually we had to do this for quite some time. And I find it very useful whenever there's a juicy thought to not stay just, okay, witness this thought and what else? But when it's juicy, to go with that one and milk that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we should probably talk about the fact that since we're dealing with trauma, that certain people would be really dysregulated in that, right? Or even overwhelmed. So it's always a judgment call, because those kinds of thoughts that say get away, or those are the kinds of things that can really get your nervous system going. Like, and so you know, and that's why you have NARM and these other things out there that are teaching people how to regulate and titrate. So, you know, at a certain place, this trauma command is either going to be like the thing that sends you into overwhelm, or the thing that becomes the key to one of the keys to your freedom. But if it's overwhelming to begin with, we have to, because not everybody can just go straight there. And so, and they might try to do that on their own and get overwhelmed. So talk about that too.
Yeah, I guess we can adapt in the moment. That's why if I feel like that's okay, the thought came, oh, I'm going to be destroyed, and then dysregulation, then we can bookmark that thought and do some technique. Okay, just hear my voice, feel the feet on the ground. It's okay, you're okay. Somehow getting them more calm and within the window of tolerance. And then you can, okay, bring up this thought again. So what do you get by believing this thought?
Yeah. And one thing I do, you know, there's tons of titration techniques, but this is one that I like to use. If we come up against a trauma command that's like that, and we need to step away and resource and ground, we do that. But then when we go back to it, you know, it's just like putting it out further is just one. There's many techniques. It's just put that command way out there so that you don't feel tortured by it, and then feel the body, bring it in a little bit, let the body adjust to the energy and fall away, bring it in a little bit more. So there's all, and that's just one of many, as you know, as a therapist, you've got to have those kinds of techniques, because it doesn't always go from like, okay, now I'm regulated, now I can just go right in.
Yes.
You know?
I think that's a whole topic. We can have another time on trauma and stuff. You know, I want to share something about this, because although the way you experientially apply it, it's not just, hey, what is the utility around that, having a coffee? No, it's like in the moment, in the somatic exploration. So although the way you do it is the most, let's say, effective and experiential applied, this idea of the utility behind suffering, I encountered it somewhere else, like David Hawkins. If you, he was a psychiatrist and mystic and sage, and he was a little bit in both worlds too. He was saying that any ego positionality, he will call it, any, you know, being a victim, being wronged, being anything, in order to let go of it, you need to see what is the payoff you are getting out of it. So in order to let go of the emotion that it's, you have to see what's the juice you are getting. And he was all the time saying, oh, there's no juice of being wronged. Or, no, you're getting to be a victim, is juicy. So he was speaking about this, but just didn't, I mean, there was no technique or something.
Well, I was just going to say, because, well, that's great that he's doing that. And that even when we see the utility, sometimes that's not enough, because you might have to just reverse it. Like if you say, okay, I believe this to protect myself, you could just say, I don't need to believe this anymore to protect myself, because that can bring up something even different than just reversing it. So you don't have to go beat a dead horse on these things, but because the utility is so strong, a little skillfulness goes a long way in that level, on that level.
Yeah, I like this actually. I think it's in your Kio series. Maybe you talk about the combining tools, but okay, reverse inquiry. It comes, something comes. I think we should give it more practical to make sense. So you know, I can be vulnerable with my girlfriend. I can be real and authentic with everyone. No, they are going to reject me. Yeah, so there's the reversing. They are going to reject me. What do I get out of believing this? I get that people like me and they stay with me. Yeah, so there's the utility, and then what you're saying to reverse that.
I don't need
Okay,
people to like
I
me.
don't need people like me. I don't mind if people are upset with me. This will
Yeah.
get more unconscious material. You know, it's
Yeah.
I really like this method. Um, by the way, you know, at some point, YouTube started to put subtitle. I don't know if you saw by itself. I mean, even in your videos, basically,
Oh, I didn't know.
you are talking and then there is subtitle automatically.
Nice.
In this video too, you'll see they
Okay.
put it. But what I mentioned is that at some point I was watching you're saying the killer bee inquiries, and the subtitle always comes like killer bee, killer bee. But I kind of like that
Like that.
because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
very like
Mhm.
it's like some kind
Laser
of
sharp.
awareness somatic drone that is going to the core of it and somewhere
Yeah.
else,
Yeah.
you know.
That's
Might
funny.
be nice for a shirt or something. Huh. Yeah, you know, also I think I mentioned to you before, but from Laura Lucille, that she inherited this technique from Lester Levinson, who actually, it might be interesting for you to check it out, because he wasn't so spiritual, but he got very sick by the time he was 40 something, and the doctors told him that you have just a few days to live, it's better not to get out of bed. So somehow this the death facing was his teacher, and he kind of started to go inside, well, where did I go wrong, what's happening? And then he somehow naturally discovered some how he was holding on a lot of these negative feelings and all of this stuff, and he started to release them. And then mysteriously he got better and better, and then started to have more and more energy, and he realized all this, which was this was in the 30 years ago, you know. He realized that all this repression and all these things, and he created this method, was called the Sedona release technique. I mean, there was developed late, it was called like this later, but anyway, one of these exercises was called A and D exercise. If there's any suffering, to bring it and to ask this back and forth. What is the seeming utility or the seeming advantage of attracting unavailable men or women, attracting relationships that are toxic? Yeah, what is the seeming utility? And then wait for something to come up. It will come up something, a thought will say, well, I get to torture myself. Okay, and then to witness anything else that comes with that. And then they will do this thing, they will go to the what's the disadvantage, and then again see what comes up, and then go back to what's the advantage and what's the disadvantage. So this going back and forth with the instruction that, hey, this is not a cognitive exercise, this is still to
Right.
mind it out. I used to use this quite a bit, but I find I'm now combining this Sedona technique with the killer bee inquiries, and then going back to Ramana, and somehow I'm sure you do kind of the same, very fluid and freestyle.
I do, and it also I can see why they would say don't make it into a cognitive thing, because even with utility inquiry reverse, it can be that way if you don't have that
Yeah,
instruction to just witness and allow. And
yeah,
I've seen people do that. So like I'll in the middle of something, a belief comes up, and I'll say, okay, so what do you get out of believing that? And you can tell that they're not witnessing and they're cognitively repeating it. Like, well, this is
yeah,
how I stay safe, this is how I protect myself. So I have to remind them again, because with something like this that pulls up so much phenomena, if you go back into the cognitive, it's like it's not going to quite go
Yeah.
as deeply. So you have to remind them to rest. So I imagine why the A and D, they had to remind people of that, because when you're bringing up things like the pros and
Yeah.
cons or the sides of duality or something,
Yeah.
you get lost in that hall of mirrors if you don't
Yeah. And there was a
rest.
little, like Laura was doing it with people who are, let's say, more advanced on the path, and she will do this, and then she will do a little bit of unfindable inquiry. Like, okay, so what are you dealing with here? These are thoughts and feelings, sensations. Are you those, or are you that which is aware of it? So in between them, it will come back to resting as awareness, you know.
Perfect.
So that was done like that.
Good.
But you know, it may work this, let's say I have probably, I don't know if you have clients like that, but I have less clients who are wanting enlightenment. I have more like people who are just suffering, you know.
Yeah.
And so I noticed that these methods can work a little bit even cognitively.
Yeah.
Even like this, it will be like the CBT, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy. It's still
Yeah.
something to do, to
Good.
explore, you know, if
Yeah.
somebody cannot witness.
I didn't think about it that way, but that makes sense. If they're not even interested in the awareness piece necessarily, they
Yeah.
might get benefit from it. Just seeing, having insight into what they
Yes.
believe.
Like the Byron Katie method, I mean, ideally I can do it with somebody more from awareness, but it can be useful just like that, mental, you
Yeah,
know.
everybody's in a different place too, and it's good to
Yes.
remember that with this
Yes.
kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, do you still have time?
I have a few minutes. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, let me see. I have to go in about 10 after, actually. 10
Okay.
after 12, my time.
Okay. Well, I think all the other topics I want, they will take some more time. So
At some point, I would like to talk a little bit about joy repression and love repression and those kinds of
yes.
things, because it really doesn't get talked about. And not only does it not get talked about repression of those things, but then there's the talk about how when you recognize awareness, there's this natural joy. And then
Yes.
I meet with people and they're like, where's the joy?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, there is a natural joy in presence, but if you've got these repressions here that you don't allow yourself to do that, that could be part of the reason. So just having those inquiries for people to hear those would be nicer to talk about that at some point later.
Yeah, I think I would like to have a whole discussion on that, because you know, maybe it's a little taste of it, but with like repression, what's the nature of repression and why it happened? And there are different styles of early repression, which they saved our life. Basically, they were not that we were bad, or it was an adaptive skill to survive. And then for some of us, maybe spiritual program, which contributes to repression. And then this repression is not, you know, as they say, it's not just you repress one, you're kind of messing with all of them. You can't just repress sadness and then have, so you are kind of repressing oneself. I think you said it once.
Yes, repressing oneself, which is the thoughts and feelings, because there's no self.
Yeah.
They're repressing the thoughts and feelings and sensations.
Yeah, repressing content. Yeah. Let's do this another time. Hey, I want to share to people who are watching this. I don't know. We are planning, and it seems like we are going to go forward with this. We are planning to do some events. So Scott is going to come to my neck of the woods in Nevada City, Grass Valley area, and we are planning California, right? It's a small town, nobody knows. So it seems like November, the weekend of November 12, 14, we are still working on what we are going to do, but it seems like we're going to do 2 days, 1 day, do some kind of training for therapists or practitioners, healers, hypnotists. So we don't have to be in the mental health, but anybody interested. It's mostly in somatic processing, awareness-based somatic processing. Yeah, we are planning to do one event like that. And then we are going to do the next day something for anybody, like some 1 day intensive, which we both want to have it less theoretical or almost not at all theoretical, but experiential. So stay tuned, and we are going to put something out there for people to attend.
Is there a place for people to contact you now, or is that not established yet for that?
Yeah, there is a place to contact me now. Yeah, I will put something in this video, and I will make the event very soon. There's still time, but like 12th, 14th of November.
Yep, should be fun.
Yeah. Bring your guitar. I told you there's have a drum here and stuff.
Yes, nice.
All right.
Yeah,
Scott.
well, hopefully we can talk about some of these things before. Maybe next time we can talk about repression, extensive.
Yeah,
So
let's talk
we'll
about
go
that
deep into it.
Yeah. All right, Scott. Thank you, and
Thank you.
see you soon. Bye bye. I'll do your thing
Bye.
with this. Bye.
Bye.